Jeremiah 1:16 and throughout the Old Testament, we see God working things together to protect His glory and His holiness. In Romans 8:28, Paul tells us God works all things together for the good of those who love Him and are called to His purpose. How do we reconcile God working things together for His glory and God working things together for our good when we fall incredibly short of His glory and honestly are more similar than we'd like to admit to the very people God was preparing to judge in the book of Jeremiah? This question has multiple important parts that we really need to break down, and I think we can do that by looking at both Jeremiah 1:16 as well as Romans 8:28. So first, Jeremiah 1:16, "And I will declare my judgments against them, for all their evil in forsaking me. They have made offerings to other gods and worshiped the works of their own hands." So what's going on in the book of Jeremiah? We see God had called Jeremiah to be a prophet to the kingdom of Judah. And his role was to tell them that God was going to bring judgment onto them in response to their many, many sins. You see, the people of Judah had broken the law of God in about as many ways as one can imagine. So God was raising up Babylon to be his instrument of judgment for the people of Judah. Through the law that God gave to Moses originally, he had made a way for his people to make atonement for their sins. So though they sinned, and they sinned a lot, God was using the law as a way, as a path for them to cover their sins so that they could maintain right relationship with God. Now, in the time of Jeremiah, surely there were sacrifices, there were the rituals that were conducted, but there was no repentance involved. There was no turning of their hearts away from their idols and to the Lord. It was all empty religion. I can't help but think of the words in Isaiah chapter 1 where God tells the people, he says, "Bring no more vain offerings." It doesn't do what it's supposed to do if your heart's not there. So the countless sins of the people of Judah have offended the holiness of God. So the just nature of God, though it had been delayed by the patient nature of God, is now bringing judgment onto the people of Judah. God's glory demanded justice. Now let's look at Romans 8:28. "We know that all things work together for the good of those who love God, who are called according to his purpose." So what is Romans 8:28 really about? To understand its true meaning, we have to read it in context, which means also reading verses 29 and 30. "For those he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, so that he would be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. And those he predestined, he also called. And those he called, he also justified. And those he justified, he also glorified." So what good is God working all things together for? Well, surely there are a lot of things in verses 29 and 30, but the big picture for us to understand is God is working all things together for good, for the salvation and sanctification of those who love him, who are called by his purpose. Romans 3 tells us very clearly that we all do fall short of the glory of God. But it also tells us that God sent Jesus Christ, that if we put our faith in him, we can find an escape from the judgment of God because Jesus Christ, the righteous one, has taken the judgment for us. We all do fall short. Now, for the people of Judah, their atonement was found in sacrifices and rituals. Here now, what our atonement is found in is the blood covering of Jesus Christ, the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. You see, Hebrews 10 tells us that for them back then, looking to the sacrifices, looking to the rituals for atonement, it was something they had to keep going back to. There was no permanence in it. It was a ritual because it was continual. For us, we have our atonement in Jesus Christ, who Hebrews tells us is the same yesterday, today, and forever. It says that his covering, the atonement that he makes, is a permanent one where we don't have to keep going back and doing it over and over again. He said, "It is finished." And for us, that means once and for all, our atonement has been made. God is still rightfully concerned about his glory and working things for his glory in Romans 8 as he is in Jeremiah 1. However, what we experience is the judgment of God not being poured out on us as it was about to be poured out on the people of Judah, but instead was poured out on Jesus Christ. And it is from that judgment being redirected that the just nature of God is satisfied. And when the just nature of God is satisfied, that leaves us justified, which is, as Romans 8:28 means, for our good. Here, God's glory is appeased by Christ and the work that he did on the cross. The person who sent in this question used the phrase grasping the enormity of it all in their email. And those are very appropriate words, because what we see here, as evidenced by this question, is an enormous outpouring of the grace of God into our lives, an enormous outpouring of favor that we do not deserve. We deserved Babylon. We deserved to be crushed, but instead we got grace. And I hope that understanding and processing that will make us treasure Christ all the more. Our ultimate good, the good that God is working all things together for, is wrapped up in his glory because it makes us his trophies of grace.